was very, very nice of you. Yeah, it's great to be back here at Gold Country Writers. It's always fun to kind of meet familiar faces and talk about things that we're passionate about. We all, are in this weird writing world, and we all have a different path. And what I hope to do today is kind of cover a lot of different subjects. Some of them very high level. Hopefully, it causes some questions to come to mind. So if you have a question, let's answer it and go on. This is put together, Margie and I just we're having a chat about what we want to know, as authors, and how to grow our careers and what the next steps are. And some of those elements that we're going to talk about today kind of came from that conversation. So I'll use my little clicker here. By the way, on Amazon, this PowerPoint clicker is also marketed as a cat toy because it has a laser in it. So just so you know. So, in putting together your author's toolkit, you're going to start to accumulate different skills and techniques and tools to help you create your work, your manuscripts, and how to move them on. If you think about it like a woodworking project, okay, you've got your design work. Before you start, your rough carpentry, that's actually putting the things together, and then your finished work to make it all pretty and sand off those rough edges. So if you think about it that way, it might make a little bit more sense. What I've done is gathered information from author friends that have gone through the same process that we have, and publishers. Spent a lot of time with acquiring editors over this last summer at Thriller Fest, talking to them, and also agents. What do agents look for, and how they evaluate manuscripts, and how to avoid some of those pitfalls. And some of my own hard-earned lessons, kind of come here as well. So, every project needs a plan. I mean, it sounds very simple. And this is going to get a little debate going about pantsers and plotters, okay? But, think about it in a way that if you're starting off a project, it's a road trip, right? Where do you want to go? I mean, a pantser, is going to start talking about, just sitting down and writing. I'm not one of those. I need a road map. If I'm on a road trip from San Francisco to New York, I'm not going to go to China on a boat to get there, most likely. So I have to know where I'm going. So, did I skip a slide here? Yeah, there it is. So, yeah, there's no one true way to do it. Everybody has their own path to figure this out, and it's what works for you, and it's what works for you at the time. So, if you're a pantser or an organic writer, those folks just sit down and let the characters just kind of tell them what to do, and then, it comes off on the page. That's not me. I tried it, but I was in prison, okay? I need rules. So the whole pantsing thing just felt like a hippie commune to me. It smelled like patchouli oil, and it just wasn't me. So God bless the people that can do that, and I know a lot of great authors that can. Hank Philippi Ryan, that's what she does. She just sits down and writes, and she doesn't know when she's halfway through the book. She doesn't know how it's going to end. She doesn't know who the bad guy is. She doesn't know who committed the crime. That would give me hives. And I have to know. I have to know. So when I sit down, I'm definitely an outliner, a plotter. I'm going to have that roadmap, and I'm going to know how it ends. I'm going to know who did it, who done it, and I might take side trips as I go. From San Francisco to New York to, stop off and see the world's biggest ball of twine somewhere in the Midwest. But I know where I'm going. But the point is, do what works for you. There's not one way to do it. If you're comfortable as a plotter, lean into it. If you like to just fly by the seat of your pants, do with that. But be prepared at some point where the book you're working on at that time, you might feel a pull to do something a little different. And Harlan Coben talks about working on projects where he'll ride the horse, he says, until it collapses. And when it does, he gets off and does something else. So be prepared to kind of make that shift. So, the big what if question, that's kind of how you kind of frame your work when you're just sitting around like, what do I want to write next? It's that what if, and you look at a couple of examples there, big what if questions. Like what if a serial killer killed people who deserved it? That was the theme of Dexter. The cop's pursuit of justice meant losing everything. 7. You remember the scene at the end in the box? What's in the box? And then, a mental institution run by a depraved, cruel nurse, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, those are big what-if questions. So, think about how to get started or how to jumpstart your book. Come up with that theme or project or question that kind of gets you interested in, what if? What if I wrote this story and it kind of developed into something larger? So, characters. Now, we can talk an entire session on just character work and what that means and how to create well-rounded, developed characters. But bottom line is, if you have a character on the page, even a secondary character, and I don't even like to call them secondary, they're supporting characters. Because if you have them in your book, they need to be there for a reason. They can't be just a set piece. And even those supporting characters have a life, have a background, and influence the way they come off on the page. So I put a little picture here from Justified, and I think that was one of the, really most well-crafted casting entourages ever. I mean, it was really, the characters in that were just fantastic. And they were based on Elmore Leonard's short story. So, you need to look at who they are, where they came from, what they're about, and in terms of motivation, what do they want, and how far are they willing to go to get it. So, and you can approach that in any way you want, whether it's, background sketches, Bibles, however you characterize those people. Now, we talked about the what if question, which is kind of plot, and then there's character. And you hear a lot about character-driven versus plot-driven. I think it's a little bit more murky than that when you get down into it, because, characters react to plot, and plot drives characters. So they're really interlinked. And if you get locked into thinking it's one or the other, I think you're doing yourself some misservice. So, getting your workshop together and getting it ready. Where you work does matter. So, and it has to be comfortable for you to sit down and do the work. Everybody's different. Some people like to go to coffee shops with the noise and just kind of blend into the crowd and let things happen. But whatever it is, make sure that it's not an excuse for you to not produce your work. So if you're in a coffee shop and all of a sudden you're interested in everybody else's conversations, which could be good for developing things, but you're not getting your words down on the page, that could be a problem. Sharpening your tools by coming to craft sessions, seminars, groups like this. You're always learning. You're always improving your skill set. If you can, establish a regular time and a place to do it. For me, it's in the mornings. The dogs wake me up at 4:30 this morning. So, I was able to get in some writing before I came here today. But that's kind of like my path, that is morning writers. Everybody's different. Whatever time of day you feel productive, if you can, lock that in. And like any habit, it becomes a routine. So you know that at that time you sit down in this place, this time, and this is what you're supposed to do. You sit down and start producing. So, this really applies to getting your first draft together. Is you measure twice and cut once, because your whole idea is just get this manuscript done, get it out, get that first draft together, keep it working. However, you need to hold yourself accountable to that, whether it's word count or number of scenes or pages. You know, that works for you, that's great. A lot of people say touch it every day. You don't have to do a lot of words, but just touch that manuscript every day to just stay connected with it. Everybody's got a different way to do it. And let's see if I think Harlan Coben, I'm going to quote him a couple of times today because I'm reading his, he just is coming out with a new writing book based on his experience. He's one of those writers that he sits down and he's largely a plotter, writes the scenes for the day, and then he's done. Next day he goes back and reads what he did that day. And then he starts anew. And he does that every day, so he's always going back and kind of looking at the previous day's work. I know a lot of people that do that. What's different is when he does 50 pages, he starts at the beginning of the book and starts editing again as he goes. So by the time he's got a first draft done, he's already edited it 10 times. You know, he's a 400, 500 page book. So, but that works for him. But find out what works for you. For me, I don't edit as I go. I want to get the story out. I want to get the draft out. Deadlines are very motivating, so you just have to kind of keep those things going. But whatever works for you. Now, I love this quote. You know, the purpose of the first draft is not to get it right, it's just to get it written. Because you can't edit what you don't have on the page. I've got some, Michael Connelly calls that first one the vomit draft. Just get it out, purge it, just get the story out. Anne Lamott, God bless her, from Bird by Bird, the first draft is shit. And then Karen Slaughter said, it's supposed to be crappy, so you can get it out there. But yeah, you can't revise what's not on the page. So your job to get that draft out is just get the story out, because you can always go back and fix what you've got there to make it, you know, more than what you have in the first draft. I would say, and it's advice that I follow, don't share your first draft with anyone. That's yours. That's the one time in this process where that product is pure, it's yours, it's all your own. That's the only time you'll see it like that. And then you start editing it and it changes. You start getting feedback from others and it changes. Yes?
Along that line, we have critique groups here. And so not showing a first draft, that's kind of where I'm bringing my material to the critique group so that I can do an edit on it and take their suggestions before I go on to write further.
Mm-hmm.
So
We'll talk about critique groups in a minute, but my caution would be go through it a few more times before you share it with your critique group. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But no, that's a good point. Yeah, things that you can do to kind of make it less rough. Listen to other authors, what they're going through. Agents have told me a lot of things that turn them off on a book, and we'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. But for example, you're not sure where your book fits on the bookshelf. You know, what genre is it? A lot of the queries that are going out to agents, they're getting tossed aside because the agent doesn't know where to sell it, how to sell it. So you've got to be conscious of that. So any of these ideas, you can kind of adapt them and make them your own and fit your process. Now, a number of these things that we're going to talk about will kind of help fine-tune that draft project that you're looking at. And the first thing is getting rid of backstory in those opening pages. A lot of it is things that happen to that character before the story really starts. That's one of the most common things we hear from agents and acquiring editors is the manuscript they have doesn't start in the right place. The story doesn't start there. It starts, actually in chapter 3 is when the story really starts. Everything else kind of leads up to that, but it's not the story. So part of it is you've done all this research, you're proud of it, you want to show it, but it doesn't really move the core story forward. So in your opening pages, kind of move that stuff to the side. There might be a place for it later. Yeah. The info dump, similar to the backstory, and this is really the research issue where it comes in. I'm so proud that I have done the work and discovered the entire comprehensive, history of the thimble, and I'm going to tell you about it. And I'm going to tell you about it for 20,000 pages. That's not where the story is. The reader doesn't care about that. There is a school of thought to say that research is important, but only to the point where it just gives the flavor of the story just enough to make it seem true. Because I think we've all gone down research rabbit holes. If you're doing that, you're not writing. You're caught in this loop because that research feels good. Writing's hard. So you're kind of avoiding doing the hard work by going down those rabbit holes. Think about the iceberg principle. You only need to show the piece of the research that's just peeking above the waterline. Everything else that you've got underneath, it's good for you to know as the writer because it kind of flavors how you write that character or dialogue, but it doesn't necessarily need to be on the page. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. This is kind of a subtle one. I like the quote there, action is character. What a person does is what he is, not what he says. There's a tendency, and it happens a lot in cozy fiction, where the body isn't found by the character. It's told to the character by somebody else who stumbled across the body in the cupcake shop. Okay? If you can, put your character in that lead role of discovering that. It puts the character right into the action, into the story, so they're driving the story rather than having somebody else kind of bring them to the main event.
What was that in the action as character? What was that quote? I'll just take it.
Yep, let's go back.
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't know if you read that, but I was thinking of something else.
Yeah, that was from Sid Field.
Thank you.
Get back. So, point of view. It really does depend on what story and how you want to tell it. I mean, you can't. There's not one hard and fast rule that says you must use first person or you must use third person. It really depends on your style choice, the kind of story you're trying to tell, and what you need to do to reveal the clues or the twists that you're trying to put together in your fiction. And like it says, there isn't a wrong way to do it, but it has to fit the story you're trying to tell. And here's a quick little graphic to kind of explain point of view. This is the basic first, second, third kind of thing. First person is that very intimate, up close, point of view. You're looking, the story's being told through that character, through their eyes. They can only see what that character sees and know what that character knows. So you see that a lot in fiction that wants to pull the reader right into the story to make them a participant in that event. The other most common is third person, where you're looking at the story being told from multiple points of view, perhaps, but it's more widespread. Think about a camera lens. This is more widespread, so the reader then knows everything that's going on, and there's variations on that. But first and third are probably the most popular points of view in modern fiction. Second person, it's you see it every once in a while coming up in crime fiction. It's kind of cumbersome to read because it's in that you and direct, indirect kind of thing. It's most common in cookbooks where you're directing, first you fold in the flour, that kind of thing, and IKEA instructions. So I would recommend you not do that unless you really, really have a need to do something a little different. There is a school of thought on fourth person view that's starting to get circulated around. It's a collective viewpoint. It's we experience this, we go here. I don't think that's going to be viable for writing your crime fiction or your thriller. and a lot of the choices depend on the story you're telling. If you're looking at suspense, okay, Alfred Hitchcock has a quote about, suspense and how to define suspense and build it. There's two men talking at a table, and there's a bomb under the table, okay? If you try to tell that in first person, who knows about the bomb? And then the suspense is broken because you know it's there. But if you're doing it in third person, the two people are oblivious to it, and then there's this bomb under the table. So there's more of a chance to build suspense in that instance with third person. And then you go for suspense to, it actually blows up, and that's, something else altogether. So with point of view, there's this thing called head hopping, where you've changed viewpoints in that chapter. So it's hard for the reader to tell who's really narrating the story. You've switched, from one character to another. It's very jarring to try to do that. Multiple point of view is great, and there's authors who really do a wonderful job at it. But you'll often see that broken by a chapter. One chapter in one point of view, and another in another character. Alex Finley is a great example of that. His last year's book was Parents' Weekend. He had 7 points of view. Actually, it was actually 14, because each point of view was a pair of parents going to a college weekend for their kids. So he was able to pull that off. And it's like a textbook on how to do multiple point of view, because it was very, very seamless. It just fed together really well. So one of the other caveats is don't annoy the reader. That's the end result. Yeah, I'm actually really nice until you annoy me. Yeah, that's what my wife says about me. The things to think about is hard to pronounce names. Sometimes there are dialects involved and that kind of thing. If you're talking about old Irish names, those kinds of things are difficult. A lot of people don't know how to pronounce them. Cliches get a little old, a little tired, so kind of avoid those if you can. Timeline inconsistencies, unless you're talking about a time travel mystery, you might want to think how you work those in your manuscript. Alternate timeline books are great, but you just got to be really cautious that all those threads are getting tied together. Plot holes, obviously. If you've all of a sudden at the end of the book somebody jumps up with a gun and there's been nothing to establish that character or whatever, that's an issue. Promises not kept. If you're talking about like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and you never get inside the chocolate factory in your book, you've lied to the reader. So you haven't kept that promise. So even your title, if you're doing that, you've got to be careful. And then Alex again talks about the yuck factor. If it's overly grotesque, if it's violence that's unnecessary on the page, and some of those issues that just turn off readers, you're probably not doing yourself a service. So just consider that when you're going through your draft. So excuse me. So now you've got a draft, and you're done, right? No. I used to be one of those writers that, I was really happy to get a draft done and hated editing. I just hated it. I've already written this damn thing. You want me to write it again? But I've become more of the opposite, where I really enjoy the revision now, because that's where everything kind of comes together, and you can kind of smooth out those rough spots, but you can see the story start to come together, and it's getting refined, and it makes so much more sense. But it took me a while to get there. So you've got a couple of different ways to do it. The arts and crafts approach to revision is just make it pretty, throw in a few words, do a copy edit, and you're done. It's probably more to it than that you need to probably do. So, yeah. I couldn't resist. So, there are a couple, everybody's got their own way of doing it. We talked about how Harlan Coben goes through, page by day on his revisions. I do multiple editing passes on my draft. Each one has a specific purpose. I'm only looking at one thing as I go through that draft. One for the story. Is this the story that I intended to tell? Are all the linkages of that story there? Did I reveal them at the right place, the right time? Naturally the plot holes, but then continuity and timeline. Is that story hold together? Is that person with blue eyes, does they still have blue eyes at the end of the story, or did they magically change to green? Those kinds of things. But then I'll do secondary passes for just character. I'll read a draft and revise just for character, and making sure the dialogue is correct to that character, so that their tone is consistent. And am I getting the right kind of mix of those people on the page together? A lot of people are talking about reading from back to front. They'll read their draft, the last chapter, and it kind of it disconnects everything that you've read before. So you're reading it, purely, in that chapter, but it also leads you to look at linkages. Like something happened in that last chapter that could only happen because something else preceded that. So that way you're not missing anything. So you kind of go back, and all those linkages, you can kind of follow them through the chain. There's a couple of sayings that kind of go along with that. Some manuscripts you read them and it's because it's just this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Where it should, and this is going to make you look at it differently, that happened because this happened, and the next thing happened because of. So you're building it and not just throwing more stuff into the fire. Reading it aloud is a big one for me. I'll do that both. I'll talk to the dogs, but also I'll use the word read aloud function, and it reads it back to you. I find more errors that way. It's amazing what you can pick up with that. So then, critique groups and letting other people see it. So, when do you choose to do that? That's your option. But I would say you go through all of those steps first. It's as good as you can make it, then bring it to a critique group. One example is International Thriller Writers has a Thriller Teak program. It's online, and I think they have like 8 satellites throughout the country, where they just drop in and do exactly like you were talking about, just reviewing the critiques and doing that. I've seen the finished products come out of the Thriller Teak groups, and they're actually very, very good. I do a first page critique program at Thriller Fest every year, myself and an editor from Putnam, and we find that the product coming out of a critique group like that it's really, really good. It's hard to find much wrong with it because it's been workshopped very closely. We have seen examples of critique groups gone wrong, where I was talking to an agent this summer, and she signed an author, liked the concept of the story, and she read the first couple of chapters, so she said, give me the full. And the woman, went and worked it on a critique group with it, knowing that this is going to happen, so they all gave her the feedback, and she incorporated it. And when it came out, the agent found that it wasn't her work anymore. It didn't sound like her. It lost her voice and her tone. So you've got to be cautious with groups, that they serve you and not, just giving you stuff and you're incorporating it all. Some of the feedback you get, great. If you're seeing 3, 4, 5 instances of the same thing that your readers are talking about, maybe you pay attention to that. But others, if you're not, buying what they're selling, it's your story, and make sure it stays your story. Beta readers, I use them, but I do beta readers with a purpose. So if I want someone to look at a specific aspect of the book, like I write a series that deals with female law enforcement officers. I was in, the law enforcement field, but I'm not a woman in that environment. So I have a group of female cop beta readers that look at that to make sure I captured that emotion, that experience right. Sensitivity readers, some people use that when they're talking about protected groups. And others are, take a look at this section. Did I cover this right? Or if you're talking about technology, send that to an expert to kind of get the tie on that. But beta readers for a purpose, not just the whole manuscript. Tell me how did, you're not giving this to your mom. And she's going to tell you, it's really good, Jimmy. You're looking for that feedback to help you make it better. So next step might be developmental editors. There are a lot. As a matter of fact, I got an email this morning. Somebody's looking for a developmental editor. There are a lot of editors out there. A developmental edit is not a copy edit. So there's a real difference there. This is a very high-level look at your book to look at, the characters, the plot, the story, are there inconsistencies, and, looking at the reveals that you've had, are they in the right places, those kinds of things. Because you've been so deep into this book, you kind of can't get that objective look from by yourself. You often need an outside look to that. And you can find those developmental editors, through writing organizations or, things like that. Mystery Writers of America does have a list of approved developmental editors on our roster. I think we have about 14 of them. And if you're a member of MWA, you also get a discount, for those services. So it's something to look at. If you're looking at book coaches, that's kind of less of an editor and more of help you finish your book kind of a person. There are people that do that, and they also have to be certified by a certain agency to do that too. So look for that kind of accreditation. Yes.
Just before we kind of get too far away from it, I wanted to bring up about the time between your first draft and editing it. And I believe, for me as a writer, that's one of the most important times, because that's the time where I have to put my first draft away and completely forget that it exists. And I have to do that for a sustained amount of time. I can't just jump back into it and edit it. And I feel like that's the important thing almost, because what you just talked about with the level of objectivity, it's easier to achieve that the more distance you put from yourself from that first draft, because you're going to be in love with it and so enmeshed with it at first, and you think everything's great. You're not going to want to take out the things that are the problems.
Right.
And so I was wondering if there's a specific time limit that maybe you have. You mentioned Sid Field earlier. Sid Field's a great screenwriter. And he's show, don't tell. I grew up reading that book, Screenplay. Action is character. And he's another one who's very much like, put your first draft away, it's not perfect. Get it all out and then forget it,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did everybody get that question? Because it's really an important point, and I didn't talk about it. My personal thing is once I finish a manuscript, that first draft, I put it in a drawer and let it ferment for as long as I can. That might depend on publishing deadlines. If I've got to turn it around quicker, but if I can leave it there until I'm almost forget what it feels like, looks like. Because when you start that next pass, that process of revision, you're reading it with fresh eyes. And you're not, so emotionally connected to that thing you just created. But then when you're revising, you can get pretty brutal, with your own work, because you have that distance with it. And that's an important point. So if you can, give yourself that time and let it marinate. So, you're almost there. Well, maybe. So, while you're getting developmental editors and everything else, let's think about what you need to do to prepare that book for public exposure. Get your social media program together. That'll help you identify, and your agents and editors are going to ask you, who your readers are, where you're going to find them, where you're going to connect with them, and which social media platform would work for you and your book. And it's going to be different for everybody. But yeah, you need to be able to find your readers and know where they're at. I know you can't read this this chart, but basically every social media platform has a different audience. They all take a little bit different take on it. Facebook, for example, my readers skew a little older. Facebook is where they hang out. Facebook and YouTube. So, but most of my interaction is on Facebook with that reader demographic. You've got 3 billion users, and they're true to that one. Instagram for me is probably my second home. Again, that same kind of interaction. I still get interaction on X or Twitter. Still got some traction there. It's a little bit different audience, but yeah, with Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, and TikTok. I mean, there's all kinds of social media programs for you to put your work out there. But social media can be a huge time suck. I mean, it really, really just can take a lot of time. So there's a lot of suggestions and guidance out there. Pick the 1 or 2 that work for you, and just start there. My first publisher drugged me to social media. I had nothing. I didn't start writing until after I retired. And the last thing I ever thought about was going on Twitter, at the time. And my publisher made me do it. I was like, who won? Why? I don't care what Ashton Kutcher had for lunch. I mean, that's what it was about to me. But you start to get that interaction. And that's key, is being present on whatever media platform you pick. Be there and show up. So you're there, you're interacting. You're not just posting you spam buy my book all the time. There's rules, 80-20, 80% other stuff, 20% your book. I think it just depends on what's going on with you and the book and its news. But have some balance. You have to think about what your readers see. What do you want them to see and take away from that social media post, whether it's your book or what's going on with you behind the page. Readers love to find out what authors do when they're not writing. So kind of you can throw that into the mix. I use not my cat. I use my dogs, my corgis. They're the plot hounds. I'll take them on plot walks and we'll film that and we'll post that. People love that. It kind of tells a little bit more about the author, what they're doing, what's up, with them behind it. Some authors have trouble with a separation of what they're doing as an author versus their personal lives, and that gets a little muddy. You have an absolute right to post anything you want on whatever subject, but is that the place where you want readers to get your personal opinions on religion, politics, and other things? Because the minute you dive into that pool, you've alienated half your reader base. You feel free to say it, but the possibility is that you've just lost half your potential sales. So as a writer, as a business, as a writer, you kind of have to approach social media a little bit differently. The comment section, yes, be engaged. Talk to everybody that's commenting on your stuff, but you don't have to argue. You don't have to defend your point. Yeah, you can always delete the comment too, if you want to do that. Goodreads is a cesspool of comments. Most authors I know don't go to Goodreads and read the reviews. There are more trolls on Goodreads than there are under any bridge that you can find. The last comment is scheduling posts. There's a lot of aggregators that you can do a post, and you can run them out for the week if you want and schedule them. It's great. Saves time. The danger is life happens. So I had a friend who wrote a book about a school shooter, and the post went out the morning of a school shooting. So it was like, you insensitive bastard. How could you do this? So you've got to be really careful about that. So kind of related to the social media is author branding. Who are you as a writer? Now, this is not about the book that you've written. This is about you. What do you represent? What makes you stand out from the crowd? That's going to be an important part. You know, there's 4 million books written a year. What's special about you and your work? You know, I use the, like Margie introduced me, 29 years behind bars. I've been in large, you know, arenas where people talk about that, and a woman in the front row just grabs her purse and kind of just goes back. But, you know, I kind of lean into it. That's my background. I don't write dark noir prison stories, but those characters just never went away. It's kind of a therapeutic way to get them out on the page. But I use that as part of my author brand. You know, I'm a prison guy, and this is my path, and it kind of influences how I write. So whatever makes you unique, your experience, you know, bring that to bear in your author brand. This is also where you know your niche. You know, if I was a prison guy writing romance, that probably wouldn't go together very well. But if I'm writing crime fiction, oh yeah, that's right down the alley. So, you know, it fits. And when you're talking about your brand, know what you are, what you write, and where you can find it in the bookstore shelves. So if you're writing thrillers, you know where that's at in the store, or mysteries, or whatever it is you might write. So, if you're going to pitch to an acquiring editor or an agent, a couple of things to think about. You need to get that pitch together and get it ready. Pitching is almost an art. Every year at Thriller Fest, we do a pitch fest, and this year we had 65 agents and about 250 authors. And if you want to know what anxiety feels like, just imagine that. Because you're going in, you're trying to get an agent, you're going to pitch your book, you've got 3 minutes to do it, you know, and you're just, you know, trying to get through this process. So you need to get your elevator pitch, you know, exactly what that is. And then that kind of morphs into a query letter when you start sending that out to agents that you're not pitching directly. So an elevator pitch is just that real quick, you know, 1 or 2 sentences that get to the core of your book's story. The character, the stakes for that character, and kind of covers the main theme. So, you know, think about it. They call it an elevator pitch because this is what you would do if you were stuck in the elevator with Steven Spielberg for, you know, by the time it took to go to the 4th floor, you know, you've got that much time to kind of convince him that your story is the next one. I mean, and it's going to change from story to story, tone to tone. I think the pitch I used for At What Cost, you know, one of my first books, was I had a detective hunting a serial killer who was harvesting his victim's organs. The detective's son needed a kidney transplant. So what did the detective do? Did he hunt down the serial killer, or did he take the victim's organs that his son needed to live? So he kind of puts that character in a moral quandary and that kind of thing, and it set the tone for that book. So other kind of pitch or hook examples, you know, Silence of the Lambs. You know, Clarice Starling, an FBI agent, seeks help from Hannibal Lecter, a psychopathic serial killer and former psychiatrist, in order to apprehend a serial killer who's been chasing or claiming female victims. Kind of captures it right there. Not long, not elaborate. It's just right there. You know, the characters are identified. The stakes are there. You know, there's a guy out killing women. So let's see if we can stop it. Another one is The Martian. You know, the Andy Weir book. An astronaut becomes stranded on Mars after his team assumes him dead, and he must rely on his ingenuity to find a way to signal Earth that he's alive and can survive until a potential rescue. I mean, it's all there. You know, the stakes couldn't be higher. And it tells you what that book is. It's clearly, you know, science fiction set in a, you know, off-world kind of place. So it's all right there. So the query letter, and this is misconstrued a lot. The query letter is not your book. It's only marketing material. Okay? So in this query letter, you're not laying out the complete synopsis of your story. You know, every character that you've introduced in the book is not in your query letter. It's all about hooking the agent on the character, again, like the elevator pitch, the character, the stakes, and the tone of the story. The only goal of that query letter is to make that agent want to read your first pages. That's it. It doesn't have to be anything more elaborate than that. But you want them to go kind of like, okay, I like it. I like where this is going. Let me read it. And then that's where you're going to hook them with your barn buster novel. Okay, so getting ready for release. Just like you're getting out of prison. You need a plan. So, what are you doing? And hopefully, well before your release, you're starting to make the network. A lot of people use street teams to kind of get buzz going on their book. Getting bookstore relationships established well before release. You have to have all these things in place, before your book hits. So it can kind of come in a lot of different forms. You can get marketing buzz going by getting print or media coverage on your upcoming book. Get to know the booksellers and bookstores well in advance. We talked about this at a previous meeting here. The bookseller needs to know you as a reader, author, well before your book comes out. They want to see you as a customer, so that when you come to them with your book, it's not like, oh, here's another author that's coming to me. I don't know who they are. What's in it for the bookstore. So you want to be in a relationship with the bookstore. You want to help them sell your book, and just coming at them cold, kind of puts you on a back foot right away. Advanced readers' copies or ARCs. A lot of publishers will give you a handful of those to kind of get the word out there. If you're looking for blurbs from other authors, you might give them an ARC to have them look at it and give you something you can post in the back of your book. Blog tours, another popular thing. There's all kinds of them out there. Find one that might work for you and your book and your theme. But they will get it out there to reviewers and that kind of stuff to get the buzz going before release. Street teams, we already talked about. You can gather a team of people together to just get out there and talk about your book, because word of mouth is big. It's still one of the best ways to market your book, is people talking about it. And then events. If you're going to be doing bookstore events, what kind of bookstore event do you want to do? There's a number of different things like that. If you like to do craft fairs or open air kind of events, whatever works for you and you think can get support for your book. So in terms of the book events, they kind of vary across the board. Folks will do just a reading. They'll sit there and read from their book and then open it up to questions. That's fine. It's a little boring. People kind of get tired of just hearing authors talk, as I'm sitting here talking to you. Question and answer sessions are a little step up above that. It's like talking about the book and then opening up for questions and interactions and those kinds of things. Probably one of the most common and well received is the in conversation setup. Setup is we have two or more authors that come together and they all kind of talk about their book and they kind of riff off one another. Those are a lot of fun, and the bookstore doesn't have to do a lot for that. Those authors just kind of take it and run. The most fun event programs I've seen have something that they're doing differently, some activity. I had my son-in-law dressed up in a inflatable cactus costume, and it's a desert-themed book, and we played ring toss on the cactus. He almost had heat stroke, but and then we gave away little succulent plants, if you got something different to make it memorable. Karen Phillips did a boxing demonstration. I mean, other people, whatever that theme might be in your book, if there's something you can pull to make it an activity to get people involved, I think it makes for a more memorable event. And yeah, bottom line is just make it fun. Yes?
You forgot to mention your wife, Anne Marie, making all these baked goods in the theme of your book.
Yeah, Emery does a remarkable job on pulling the slightest little thread of a theme out of my book and just making a complete spread for it. Whether it's cupcakes, cookies. We did a chili feed that had something to do with a couple of the books. So yeah, just make it different, make it fun, and people will talk about that. And again, word of mouth. This is a fun event. Maybe I'll show up next time he does something. So yeah, so thank you for that back there. So yeah, but bottom line is make it fun. I know we've covered a ton of information, but let's open it up to questions and see if there's anything else we can do. Yes, ma'am.
So for your first draft, do you keep it and then you make a copy of it and then you edit that, or you just edit the first draft altogether?
Yeah, the question was, do I keep that first draft and edit from that, or copy it as a new document? I'm paranoid as hell that I'm going to lose something, so I'll copy it 5 different ways. It's on Dropbox, it's on Google Drive, I'll save it everywhere. And yeah, I'll save it as a new copy, and I'll put a date in the file name just so it gives me a reference of when this was. Some people put revision 1 or that kind of thing. After you're seeing revision 14, it feels like, am I ever going to finish this? So that's why I just go with the date. But that's a good question. Yes?
Okay, this is a hot button topic that everybody's, it's like politics. You're on this team or you're on that team. So if you get stuck, you're writing something and man, I just don't know where to go. Well, let's check with AI. Maybe it has some ideas for me. So I'm not having them write my book, but I'm having them present some ideas. Just what's your opinion?
I'm very much anti-AI. I know as an organization, Mr. Res America, we put out a pretty strong statement about where we stand with use of generative AI for writing. I think it's generally accepted that folks are going to use it for grammar check and that kind of thing. But once you get into plotting my book or what goes next, I think it kind of starts a slippery slope. I'm one of the people that's, my books were assumed by Anthropic. So hopefully I'm going to see some, money back from them at some point. But yeah, your work is stolen. That example, I'm tempted not to do that. What I've found is more effective for me if I'm stuck. And I'm one of those people that doesn't believe in writer's block. It means I'm not looking at the scene right. The characters are in the wrong place. They're not prepared to do what I think the story needs to do. Because I'm a plotter, I'll go to the end of the book and I'll write the ending. And then something will reveal itself there by doing that I realize, oh, that's what I needed to put in that chapter that's giving me problems. So because I'm a plotter, I can pull that out and then go back and start that chapter again with that missing information.
If I could follow up, because of what you mentioned, copyright, magic word. So Anthropic is the owner, the father of Claude, and as some of you may know that Anthropic scanned a whole bunch of other authors and used them to build their model. The big lawsuit against them came down to the authors who have copyright, this is a big word, are protected. The copyright has to be in the United States Copyright Office.
Registered.
So if you're a foreign author, you don't get no money. So most of us, or what I learned, is that as soon as you write something, you can prove that you wrote it at this time, it's copyrighted, it's your words. But in this case, it don't count. So I decided after I heard that I would send my books into the Copyright Office, Costs a few dollars to do that, and.
It does.
Now, so I did that in February, and I've just learned that, it's probably gonna take about a year before you get an answer back.
Yeah, one of the misconceptions is, yeah, you've got the copyright. And Anthropic, that particular litigation required that copyright be registered. That's the thing. Big five publishers were not often registering that copyright. So the front matter of the book says copyright, in the year and the author's name, it never got registered. So yeah, it's a big hole. So a lot of publishers, are now kind of making up for that. They're going back and refiling. But yeah, that's an important point. Yes?
One of the things you talked about earlier was being, you mentioned how you're a plotter, and then some authors are more organic in a sense,
Right.
where they just kind of sit down and they start going to the place.
Mhm.
And when you brought up the Sid Field quote, Sid Field is an amazingly structured
Yeah.
writer. And he breaks down, if you ever read his book Screenplay, I highly recommend it, even if you don't write screenplays, because he breaks down 3-act structure to a T. He talks about dramatic premise, he talks about inciting incident. And one of the things that is like the second chapter in that book is know your ending before you start writing anything. And my question to you, because when I was a young screenwriter, one of my favorite screenplays ever was the script for the film Seven. That was written by Andrew Kevin Walker, who was not a screenwriter before that. He worked at Tower Records. And he said in an interview, it was based on his time living in New York and how depressed it made him. He said that I had to sit down and outline every single thing in that story. He did that for Seven, and it works beautifully. It's structured. His next screenplay is 8mm.
Mhm.
He says, I had this whole outline figured out. I sat down to write the screenplay, and I'm getting to this point where there's a gun on a table. And my outline goes, he moves the gun into a drawer, and I thought, what if the gun went off? And he went off and wrote that, and that became the ending of his screenplay. So my whole point with all that long-windedness is, how do you negotiate with your outline still, or do you just follow it all the way through to that first draft and just put it out there?
Yeah, I think that's a good point is, you have to be flexible, I think, because as you're writing your story, even though I've got it outlined pretty well, I'm going to allow myself some side trips to go see that biggest ball of yarn or whatever. But yeah, I've had to realize that, okay, I didn't think of this while I was plotting, and this would be a really neat little twist to kind of throw in there. I did that with River of Lies, the book that came out last year, because there's a twist at the end that I did not see coming when I wrote it. But I think it makes it really effective, the way it flowed in. But yeah, I think you have to leave yourself open to it. For me, I still have to know where I'm going. I'll be in that county. I might not be in the right city that I started with, but I'll be in that neighborhood at least.
That's a great way to put it. Because I feel like, me personally, if I know too much about what's coming next, I get bored with it and I want to do something completely different.
Yeah.
So I think, but knowing, where the county is versus, the number on the door,
Yeah.
I think is a great way to put it. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, centuries and centuries ago when I was in college, I took a class in Alfred Hitchcock and I learned about the MacGuffin. And I put it in my book and it was so much fun because it pulls you, as they said, it pulls you through the characters and creates the adventure and the excitement. And you could write the entire book without having a MacGuffin, but to have one, it brings all of these different fun things to it. And I tried it, and it's so much fun. And I was talking with someone sitting at a table, we were discussing my book, and we talked about the MacGuffin. He goes, oh yes, that would have been Anna's book. And he knew what that was.
Yeah.
And so, even though, I'm sorry, is that right?
No, that's fun. What was your MacGuffin?
Pardon?
What was your MacGuffin?
Oh, my MacGuffin was a book.
Okay.
A book that was handed to a little girl, and she would lose it, and then she would find it, and then somebody else would come and take it, and then,
Yeah.
and so then she would have to get it, she'd want to throw it away. But it all, but the whole story was going along. But here was this book that, you know, why does she need it? What does she want with it? I'm tired of the people's trying to get it. And, you know, I could have written the whole story without the book, but it's what's cool, she threw
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Well, that's neat. Very neat. Yes.
What's a MacGuffin?
What's a MacGuffin? It's kind of that inanimate object that, like Hannah said, it kind of propels the characters through the story. Think of Maltese Falcon,
Yes,
the statuette,
yes,
Rosebud, the sled, you know, those kinds of things.
yes.
Just kind of how people react with it, react off of it, and it kind of can fuel a mystery story
Or
really well.
note. Alfred
Mhm.
Hitchcock used this note that somebody found, and it took them all over the
Right.
place. And you have, but it pulls in the adventure and the excitement.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were involved in prisons. Please tell us, were you a correctional officer or a prisoner?
Yes. Yeah, no, I was the associate warden at Folsom. I was a hostage negotiator. Then I had a job that took me all over the state, Pelican Bay, Corcoran. All the scenic spots that they don't list in the Chamber of Commerce brochure. Yeah, so I was a correctional counselor. I was a probation officer before that.
You
So.
probably knew my dad. He was the captain at Vacaville, Ernest Brawley. You ever know him?
That name sounds very familiar. Yeah.
That was my dad, and I was raised in prisons all over the state of California. And I became a prison guard in San Quentin.
There you go. Yep, same with me. I lived all over the state. My dad was a corrections guy,
Oh,
so
they knew each other, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Well, my dad was a sergeant at San Quentin for a while.
So was my dad.
Yeah,
Well, they knew each other.
it had to. Yeah.
No, that's my first.
There's a coincidence.
How did you get your first agent for your first book?
Get my agent for the first book. It actually,
What was like your rejection ratio for that?
yeah, that's one thing that you do develop a thick skin for rejections. I mean, that is part of the business, and it feels personal, but it really isn't. I mean, agents are rooting for you; they want to like your book, but it's more often it's not right for them right now. You know, they've got something else very similar in their catalog, or they don't know how to sell it. It's not personal, but it sure feels that way. So yeah, I'd sent out a number of queries and didn't get any response. And finally, I went to the Book Passage Mystery Writers Conference in Marin County at Book Passage. They had an agent panel, and I kind of liked the way one agent kind of talked about author relationships and that kind of thing. So basically, I followed her around the bookstore after that event, and she asked me, "Hey, what are you working on?" And I had my elevator pitch of at what cost, and told her, and she said, "Yeah, send that to me." And then a couple of months went by. She ended up signing me, and then I think a month or two after that, she'd sold a 2-book deal on that with a publisher in New York.
This was for your first book. Before that, you were kind of unknown.
Yeah, still am, but yeah. Yes.
Do you have an opinion about agents being located in the New York area versus not? Is that an inaction in this remote post-COVID world? Or?
Yeah, agents and their location, New York. New York is still a big agent hub. The big literary agents are there. And they do have access to the publishers that are, right there in New York. So there's that piece of it. But I think post-COVID, everybody's used to doing things online. So it's probably less important now that, you have an agent that's, co-located next to, Simon & Schuster or something. Because there are a lot of really good West Coast agents. And they publish, big books, or they get deals for big books. So I think it's probably less important. At Thriller Fest, we do that Pitch Fest thing, and we're pulling agents from all over the country. So it's, a lot of them are local, and they can just, commute in to the city for the event. But I mean, we had agents from, California, from the Midwest. A lot of agents are popping up in the South, in Virginia, Georgia, Alabama. for that Southern Gothic kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't think it's a problem.
Kelly has a question.
I'm behind the.
Oh, hi, Kelly.
I'm on the, writing my third book in a series. First two have two protagonists, and it's written in first person. This third one, and these are mysteries.
Mhm.
This third one, I'm playing with my two characters, still first person, but I've got to introduce this third person to make this work out. I had him in first person for a while, then I switched into third. What do you think about doing that in a book? Mixing those points of view.
I think it can work. If you have one central character, for example, and that character is always told in first person, that works. And then everybody else around them, it can be third person. I've seen that work effectively. As long as you're managing it so that there's no confusion about who's being talked to.
Like using chapters or
Yeah,
sections.
and also, because you're using first person, again, you're limited to what that character can know, see, and
Right.
touch. And that could be effective because these other characters in third person know more than that main character. So that could be an interesting kind of little twist.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes?
How did your work inform your writing, specifically like being a hostage negotiator you mentioned? Like, how do you feel that has informed maybe your way of writing characters or writing on plot?
I mean, it does help. That background does help writing character. I don't use a lot of the events and things that happened. There's some things that kind of sparked ideas for books, but I don't use outright characters. But yeah, I think part of it is living in that world for 29 years. You start to be able to read people pretty well. And you can kind of pull out those character traits. And it makes for fun application on crime fiction because, yeah, as a hostage negotiator, you don't trust anybody. So you don't trust this character that you're putting on the page. They're not an unreliable narrator per se, but you're going to make them, earn what they're saying and what they're doing on the page. So it's not a direct thing. But yeah, I've had events that sparked, ideas for the book. Like in Dead Drop, it's set in the desert Southwest, deals with immigration issues and border violence. I was doing a prison audit at the prison in San Diego. It's right on the border. You can stand in the yard and you could look and see the international border. And usually when you do an audit in the prison, that warden wants everything just pristine, just working, like clockwork to show off to the visiting warden, It was just a frantic mess when I walked in. Something was going on. So it turned out to be they couldn't clear their count. Now, the count for a prison is like one of the basic things you do. You need to know how many inmates you have and where they're supposed to be. That's kind of like bottom line. So they couldn't clear the count. They went back and did it 3 times, still couldn't clear the count. So they finally narrowed it down to the minimum facility, which sits just outside the walls. And they went through a picture count, bed by bed, of the inmate that was supposed to be in that bed. And they found out, this is a couple of hours, they found out they had one more inmate than they were supposed to have. It's not inflation, but what happened, and they tracked it down, was an undocumented migrant got so cold, so hungry on the trail, that he walked into the prison for a place to sleep. So that kind of stuck with me, and I used that in the book as like, are conditions that harsh that cause people to make those kinds of decisions, where that was his best option. So that was kind of the spearhead for that series, really. Yes?
Just one more quick question. From concept to what you would consider finished, a novel, how long does that take you?
How long does it take? It varies depending on the novel and the deadline that my publisher has. I think I can do a first draft in 90 days, and then probably another 3 to 4 months revisions. So I'm looking at 8 or 9 months for a project. Mhm. Any other questions? Yes.
How much does your publisher change things? Like when you say you've done 3-4 months of revisions and stuff like that, so you've got a story, but how much are they gonna change it or ask you to come back and change something? How much-
Publishing editor changes. It does happen. Not as much now as it did early on. And I don't know if that's because they're just, they know me now and they just, take a light touch. But I know one of I think it was the second book with Crooked Lane, they wanted to change my ending. I had a yeah, and that was back in the day where it was fairly new to me, and this was very personal. And how could you touch my
Right.
work? And now it's like, oh, you want to change it? Okay.
Do they change it or do they make you change it?
Oh, you have to do it.
Oh, they
So you can discuss
That's
it.
painful.
You can discuss it back and forth. And I understood what they were trying to do. And the publisher wants to make the book better. They want to make it appeal to a broader reading audience. Now, mine had to do with a prison escape. And having lived in that world, I knew what you had to do to just walk out of a minimum facility, just like that guy can walk in. The publisher could not get over the fact that this was a prison, and you just can't leave. Even though it was a minimum facility. And they really dug in on that point. So I had to change the last third of the book to make some elaborate, escape plot. And they were fine with that. It had nothing to do with reality or accuracy, but they were cool with it. So that kind of told me that, okay, because largely you're dealing with editorial staff that are fresh out of grad school, 20 years old maybe. Their life experience is a little bit shorter than ours. And that's the lens they look through. But if that's who's going to be selling and buying books, you kind of have to meet somewhere in the middle. So I'm less precious about that stuff now. If they need me to change something, I'll change it. Yes?
I tend to spend a lot of time editing, and my manuscript has been through a developmental edit, beta readers, self-editing, more full editing, two editors, more beta readers.
Yeah.
And then I put it over into a PDF on my iPad, and I say, forget all that, just read it like it's a book.
Mhm.
And then I'm back in editing. So how do you know?
How do you know when you're ready?
Done?
Yeah. It's really that personal feel. I think all of us get to the point where we've written a book and it just makes you sick to read it again. My God, don't make me read this again. But it's at some point it feels like you're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and nothing's going to change. You're changing little bits that really don't affect the story. It's maybe time to go ahead and kick it out the door. You're probably ready. I know a lot of writers get caught up in that never-ending editing loop, and it's just hard to know when to cut loose. But yeah, you've got to kind of make that decision by yourself. Yes?
You mentioned an author that was really good at multiple points of view. Who was that?
Alex Finley, Finley.
Alex.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
So if family and friends are not an option, how do you find your beta readers?
Family and friends are not an option. It could be really anywhere that you're involved in. It can be groups like this for sure, but it could be if you're involved in a social group with something outside work. They like to read. Hey, take a look at this. What do you think of it, or this part of it? That kind of thing. So that's one way. If you're looking at specific technical guidance on an issue, like I needed to go to the Sacramento Fire Department and get somebody to look at something I was writing that had to do with fire suppression and the equipment, and I wanted to make sure it was named right and all that kind of stuff. public information officers for those agencies are a great place. They want to have their stuff represented accurately. So it's always an option to do something like that. Yes?
Has there been any of your work that you've done that you felt like maybe you didn't quite stick the landing on? And if so, I'm not gonna, you don't have to name it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If so, how did you use that for your next project or to get going?
Yeah, I think I'm like a lot of writers that, you know, 3/4 through the book, this sucks. It's the worst thing that's ever been written. It will never see, it's going to be birdcage liner, you know, I know where this is headed. But yeah, just getting through the process, you have to kind of trust the process a little bit too, that, you know, I've done this before, I know I can finish this manuscript, you know, you can do it. And you just kind of have to kind of put those voices on pause a little bit, and don't listen to that chirping that's in your ear about this sucks. But you can kind of use that as fuel to just kind of keep going too. But yeah, you kind of turn it off, finish the book, and move on. I think every book you do turns out better because you're still learning and you're finding some neat tricks or how to hide a twist or hide a reveal. You know, those kinds of things that you're constantly learning. So I think every book gets better.
Have you had to deal with that after, let's say, the book has been published? Because when you're on deadline, sometimes you're trying to get things going.
Yeah, I don't think I've had to deal with it once it's published. I know there's books that I like more than others, and that might be part of it. But yeah, it's just, you know, they're all your baby, so you want to love them all. But there's that one adopted one over here that, you know, you just question. You know. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, thank you very much.